Alright guys, I'm back at this site again today. This one keeps pumping out some good problems. So on the last video or so, I showed how you can get in here and figure out what address the fan coil is that you're looking for, because I've got two sets of condensing units or outdoor units that all have their own indoor units connected to them. So in this case, this building is for it's an apartment building, and indoor unit or apartment number 328 is having an issue. So when I hook up to either of these units, all it pulls in is the addresses. So it just tells me it's address 1, 2, 3 up to 50. But that doesn't do me any good because I don't know what address unit 328 is. Of course I could go in there and look, then I have to grab a ladder, go in there. It's an apartment building. We have to make sure it's okay with the tenants. Then I'm invading their space and their privacy, getting into the ceiling, trying to find the address. When, if you recall, I can just come over here. So 328 is right there. That means it lives on this controller. Okay? In this case, it does because we don't have any other controllers in here. So that fan coil for room 328 lives on this controller. That means we have to connect to this controller to view that unit. So if you remember, what we can do is click on that wrench icon, come in here, INITIAL, INNIT. Okay, we can log in there, come over to groups. Now this gives us all of our indoor units, addresses, and which label they are in the main screen. So we can come in here and say address 2 is for room 319. It is for CEO's office. It is for cubicle 4, whatever you want to name it as. So we're looking for 328. Come down. So that is address 9. So when we connect our maintenance tool to this controller, we know that the unit we're looking for 328 is address 9. So that when we pull up our maintenance tool, we can look at that and specifically look at indoor unit number 9 and know that that is for room 328. We can figure out, okay, it's for address 9 on the central controller, and we can connect to these. If you really know the addressing scheme, you would know that it's probably most likely number 9 is connected to outdoor unit 5152. Now that's not a guarantee, so I always like to just, if I find address 9 resides on that central controller, I'm going to just connect to that central controller. Then I can pull it in, and then while I'm here, once I've got it pulled in, I can look and say, okay, my outdoor unit is address 51, 52, we've got a 53 BC, and then we've got a 64 sub BC. I can pull those panels off and say, okay, this one's 51, 52, so these are the units we're looking for, right? So in this particular case, this is indoor unit 9, set point is 67, indoor temp is 71.6, so basically 72 degrees. So it's pretty far, it's 5 degrees off set point, with a 20 degree superheat. Now target is between 0 and 15, so all your superheats in cooling only should be between 0 and 15. Now if you look, we've got kind of scattered numbers, 4 degrees, 16, 13, 15, 22, 20, 17, 14, 17, 15. Which superheat doesn't look like the others? Negative 2.2 maybe? So in this specific case, what led me to this is, one, I just had another floor lose a bunch of these valves. But when you come in here and you look at your subcooling, SC1 and SC6 should be between 9 and 27, 27 to 54. SH2 should be 4 degrees. That target is 4. Okay. Now, regarding that SH2, that is what is controlling our subcooling. Okay. So that SH2 controls this valve, and it says after our 2 subcoolers we want to see 4 degrees of superheat. If superheat is higher than 4, we're going to open up this valve, allowing more flash gas, more refrigerant in to then hit our subcoolers to cool down our high pressure line and condense that liquid and subcool it as much as possible. Okay, so we go back, we're at 15 degrees of SH2, should be 4. It's pretty far off. Okay, so we come back down here and we've got 16 degrees, 22 degrees, 17 degrees, 14, 17, 15. We've got pretty high superheat. We've got high superheat in the branch controller. It's 15 degrees, should be 4. No subcooling. Yet when you come out to your outdoor units, you've got a TH5, which is your suction line, entering your accumulator of 30 degrees. Your suction saturation temperature is 28. So you've got 2 degrees of superheat at your outdoor unit. Yet you've got 15 degrees of superheat at your branch controller, and your indoor units all have relatively high superheat. Some are lower. You know, we got a 4, 4, 6, 2.9. But that definitely stands out. Okay, so how that calculates it is we've got TH2, TH3. TH2 is right after the metering device in the indoor unit. Okay, so every single indoor unit has its own metering device. These aren't mini splits. They don't have the metering device in the outdoor unit. Every single indoor unit has its own individual expansion valve. So here's TH2 right after the LEV. We go through our coil, we superheat, and we come out, and there's TH3. How can we possibly have a TH3 that is lower than a TH2? That would equate to a negative superheat in this case. We've got 46 degrees and then 45 as we leave the coil. So the easiest way to diagnose that is I just went over, found that port, so we can look at our branch number, and these are all the ports that the unit is assigned to. So this one, address 20, is on port 4. In this case, we have a sub branch controller. Okay, sub branch controllers must be addressed correctly. They have to be 50 higher than the lowest addressed unit that is connected to them. In this case, it's address 64. So that tells the sub branch controller, hey, you are connected on 14 and up. So everything including 14 and up is connected to you. Okay? Now why we have to do that is because you see this unit is on port 1, and we also have another unit that's on port 1. So how does the branch controller know, okay, we've got 2 port 1s calling for cooling. Well, which ports do I open on the branch controller? Because we have 2 that are supposedly saying that they belong to port 1. Which we can have up to 3 units on the same port, that's fine. But if you're not designing that way, then it's not going to work correctly. Okay? So the sub branch controller says anything 14 and up, I'm connected to. So if 14 has a 6, it's on the sub branch controller, not the main branch controller. Okay? If we have a number 1 and it's 17, okay, 14 and up, it's on the sub. It's asking for port 1 on the sub, not the main BC. Okay? So I went over, found port 4 on the sub BC, closed it, okay, everything started to look a little bit better. I didn't really like it as much as I wanted to. So I close it at slide 44, which is this slide. If we go forward 10-15 minutes, you can still see, so we've got -2 degrees, but that doesn't matter because that port's closed. We've got 70 and 68. There's probably still liquid in that suction line boiling off because it's totally full of liquid because that valve is totally wide open. Okay. Now, some of our superheats did come down quite a bit, but it still didn't give me the increase in superheat at my TH5 that I would like to see. You can still see we've got 29 suction saturation temperature and a 31 degree actual line temperature. So we've only got 2 degrees of superheat at our outdoor unit. Yet we've still got 8 degrees of superheat at our BC, and we've still got multiple units with out of spec superheat. So I just said, okay, screw it. Let me just go and close the sub BC entirely. So there's 3 lines on the sub BC. I closed all 3: the liquid line, hot gas line, and the suction line. And that is from slide 64 and up. So if we go forward about 15, let's do 20 minutes. Look how much more even our superheats are. Much better. So right now I've got these 3 ports closed and port 4. Okay, this is our unit in question, unit 9. That has come down about 1 degree when it was sitting at 72 degrees basically the entire time. Okay, so from this point on I have these 3 ports closed and this one, because I had noticed that those ones were the only ones out of spec 2. So if we go back, no, we'll have to go forward. So these ones are still pretty low as well, when the other ones were pretty high. Okay, these ones could be a problem too. I'm still digging into this, but you've got to figure out what doesn't belong, what's not like the others. So if we go forward to now, so I've had this running for 108 minutes. I've had these 3-4 ports closed for probably about 30 minutes now. Look how much better our indoor superheats look. Yeah, they're low, but I've got it in test mode. We've got several units that are, I mean, pretty cold. There's not much load on them. This unit, again, number 9, was our problem child, has 5 degrees of superheat. When I first got here, if we go back to the beginning, we had 25 degrees of superheat. 14, 18, now we go forward, 9, 4, 4.3. Okay, we come in here and we look at our SH2, it's 4 degrees. Much better than the, 20 degrees that we had at the start. Now we've got 2 degrees on SC1, 9 degrees on SC6, so that's slowly coming up. If we go back, I'll have to watch it for a little bit longer. It's probably because we don't have much superheat anymore, because again, there's not much load. We've got some units at 66, 68. So that superheat at our outdoor unit isn't as high as I would expect. But earlier, if I go back 15 minutes or so, as soon as I closed those ports on the BC, immediately saw more superheat at my outdoor unit. So like I said, this is still under investigation, but I'm really leaning towards having several failed LEVs that are stuck in the open position. Unfortunately, that's going to be quite a pain, but that's what everything is pointing me towards now. There's no way you can have high superheat at your indoor units, high superheat at your branch controller, but yet you have no superheat at your outdoor units. The only case you'd see that is in a case like right now, when we don't have much load on our fan coils. I mean, everything entering 42, leaving 45, there's not much load on these systems. It's been running for almost 2 hours now in test mode, so it's important to watch these for as long as you possibly can and try to confirm with yourself. Well, if you looked here and you had high superheat and low subcooling, and you had high superheat at your indoor units, and you said it was low and you started adding refrigerant, well, if it was low, then you need to prove it to yourself. You would have high superheat and low subcooling at your branch controller, but how would you explain to yourself that it's low when you have extremely low superheat at your outdoor units? You have refrigerant, it's just not in the right place. You need to figure out where it is and why it's not in the correct place. So again, after more testing, I went around and opened up these 3 ports again. I left this 4th port closed because that one was the biggest outlier of them all, seeing as how it had such low superheat. So I put it into test mode again, let it run, and everything was pretty much more or less running fine. The problem, the thing you've got to watch out for when you start closing valves is if you start closing half the valves, or even 4 or 5 valves, or even a couple valves, if it's low on refrigerant, now you've cut off 2 indoor units, and it may start working fine, and you think that maybe something's wrong with those indoor units, when in reality you're just cutting off the systems that need some refrigerant, and now it's able to send more refrigerant to other units. Instead of sending it to everything, it's only having to send it to all but 2 or 5 or 8 units. That can add up pretty quick. So you always have to think to yourself, okay, I think this is the problem, how can I prove it? So I think that 6, 7, and 8 and port 4, their indoor units have bypassing LEDs. So I went through, closed those 3, closed that last one, and everything started to work fine. Again, you have to make sure that you're not just simulating the system now has more refrigerant, it's able to give more refrigerant to the other units. So you have to continue to ask yourself, okay, now how can I prove it even further, right? So after watching it for a while, everything was running fine. I wanted to check to see, now that it's been running for a while in full test mode, if I open these 3 back up, what happens? And nothing really major changed. It was still looking decently good, right? My superheat didn't come up much. Everything looked more or less the same. So what I ended up doing is running it for a while. You can see that these 3 ports were previously closed, they're now open. I still have 16 degrees of superheat in my branch controller, but now I have more superheat in my outdoor unit. Let that run for a while, everything was looking good, and then I think it was about here. So you can see we've got 6 degrees of superheat. All my superheats look good there. That's still closed. I think it might be just barely opened in this slide. Come back up. We got 36 degrees and 33. So 3 degrees or so of superheat at our outdoor unit. But then when we come up to the next slides, so right here is when it's definitely open. So if you watch all of our superheats, as soon as that valve was open again, all of our superheats climbed up. We've got 20 degrees superheat at our branch controller. Our superheat went down a little bit, 32 degrees at our TH5. Again, it's probably because there's not much load, especially now that we've been running it for a while. A lot of these temps are quite low. But when you open that one valve up and now all of a sudden all of these superheats that were previously 2 to 5 are now in the teens, some are in the 20s, that's pretty telling. Now what you can do to be extra sure is maybe leave everything open and then go close a valve on a system that hasn't given you any problems. So pick one, we can go close this one and see what the system does. If I close that and then all of a sudden everything goes back down to 2 to 5 degrees of superheat, then we know we have another problem and we're just chasing our tail. But if I close that valve and everything still looks the same, and then I can open that valve back up and then go close this valve again, and if everything comes back down to 2 to 5, then I can pretty confidently say there's not much more troubleshooting I can do to verify that that valve is flooding. You know, you can go over, fill the temperatures, verify that you're actually getting 48 and 45 out. But I mean, right now I'm pretty confident that that valve is our only issue. So I'm gonna go ahead and go close that again, and we'll see if our numbers come back down and exhibit what we were seeing right before I open that back up, just because I like to be sure if I'm gonna go in there and start replacing valves and doing all this work and telling the customer that this is gonna be the fix, I wanna be correct. And if I'm not correct when I put this valve in and everything looks the same, I can say that I was as thorough as I could possibly be. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and then I'll check back in. Alright, this is the last update. So as of right now, the port 4 is open. You can see we've got that same negative superheat, which, if you don't know, negative superheat just means there's just liquid there. It's not superheated. Can't have a negative superheat, but that's how it's reported here. So don't come at me and tell me it doesn't exist. So right now we've got 32 degree TH5. We've got a 30 degree TE, so that's our saturated suction temp. Again, 2 degrees. 18 degrees of superheat there. All of our indoor units, relatively high superheat. So right now I've closed the valve and watch everything slowly come back down. Immediately, pretty much. If we come back up, we've got 0 degrees of superheat there, which it'll go back. You've got to, this is why you have to watch it for a long time, because one slide doesn't tell you anything. One slide is 1 minute of data, and it can be completely different 60 seconds later. So, and if we go back here, you can see what I was saying about there should be superheat there. So right now, we've got about 8 degrees of superheat at our outdoor unit. No superheat there. Light subcooling, but I think it's just because these units are water source, so they don't need as much subcooling. You can see our T6, our liquid line, going to our indoor units is about 80 degrees. Condensing temp is 95, so we've got about 15 degrees of subcooling anyway. So, but yeah, I mean, look at all those superheats. Go back to here. High superheat, we close it, and immediately just goes right back down. So don't be afraid to experiment with stuff on these. Close valves, turn off units. We can go in here and manipulate the LEVs to open or close. You can go shut units off, you can turn them off, you can put some in heat, you can put some in cool. The biggest mistake that people make, I have people send me logs on Instagram or other technicians that I work with. Put it into one mode and leave it. Do not touch it. Do not change the mode 15 times in an hour. It just makes it impossible to read. Put it all into cooling, put it all into heating, and just leave it alone for an hour and just watch it. Nothing worse than getting a log and it's in cooling for 10 minutes and then I start to see something and then it goes into heating for 15 minutes and then it's off and then it goes into cooling main for another 15 minutes because people just won't leave it alone. Put it into cooling, put it into heating, and just leave it alone and watch it. That's the only way you're going to get reliable data. The system has to run for a long time to get balanced out and to start giving you valuable information. So that's it on this one. I'm going to go ahead and get that valve replaced. We'll just do just the one, because like I said at the beginning, it might have been those three as well, but I wasn't as patient as I should have been, and I closed that one. Didn't get an immediate reaction like I was hoping for. Watched it for a little while and then closed all those, and then I started to see some changes. This is why it's important to verify, and then verify again.